Hey guys, what's going on? It's Dave with Evil Eye Games. Today we're going to go ahead and explore the sound within our sound settings and how we can adjust the volume. The first thing to note is this requires at least 4.12. If you don't have 4.12, the following will not work for you. But before we get into our sound settings, I want to do just a little bit of cleanup. One thing you'll notice is when we hit play, and right now at the main menu, it's not showing our mouse. So we're going to go ahead and fix that. As well, when we go into the graphic settings, the graphic settings seem to skip around a bit. So we're going to have to fix that also. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the back button and I'm going to exit out. Now the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into our HUD folder and open up our 3P player HUD. And if we go down to our set current widget event, at the end here, we end up creating the widgets and setting the input mode. But we're going to have to do one other thing. So I'm actually going to drag these guys out of the way. And in these newer versions of Unreal Engine, you have to actually tell it to set the mouse cursor to show or hide. So we're going to drag off of our player controller here. And we're going to search for show. And we're going to find the set show mouse cursor. So we're going to go ahead and plug this guy in. It's going to need a target of the player controller. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm just going to duplicate this for these. So one for each UI element. We're going to go ahead and plug them in. And then we can go ahead and reconnect over here to the set input mode. And I am going to plug in the player controller to the targets for our show mouse cursor. And I'm going to go ahead and actually duplicate this set input mode, one for each one of these. And we're going to have to plug in a reference to our player controller to each one. So, I'm just going to make a copy of this and replug in the targets. And we can actually, I'm going to do it this way. I'm just going to add in a reroute node and spawn everything off of that reroute node. Like so. So we should have our player controller plugged into our show mouse cursor sets, and we should have it plugged into our set input mode for the UI. And then we're going to have to plug in our set current widget as well. So we'll take our current widget and plug it in to the in widget to focus. So we're going to have to make sure all of this is all plugged in. All right, so now that we have everything plugged in, we just have to set when we want to show the mouse cursor. For the gameplay widget, we want this to be set to false. For a main menu widget, we want it to show it, so I'm going to click it to make it true. For the loading screen, I don't really want to show the mouse cursor, so I'm going to leave it as hidden. And finally, in the pause menu, we want to show the menu, or show the mouse cursor. So I'm going to go ahead and compile and save. And if we hit play again, when this finishes loading, we should be able to see the mouse cursor right away, which we do. So that is working good. Next, we are going to have to go ahead and take care of our graphics change. And I think this has to do with a change between the way that the engine loads between the 4.10 and the 4.12. So we're going to go ahead and I'm going to close out our player HUD and we're going to open up our settings menu widget. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to find our graphics pane and show that. And I'm going to select the resolution text, and we're going to find the binding where we get our resolution text. And I'm going to go ahead and hit the little search glass next to it to bring us to our function. I'm going to drag this off to the side here. We're not going to need this current resolution text anymore, so I'm going to actually delete this. And what we're going to do is instead we're going to go ahead and get our current resolution index, and then from our execution pin, we're going to search for the supported full screen resolutions. So we're going to drag off of our resolutions and we're going to go ahead and get. and we're going to get our current resolution index. And then we're going to go ahead and break it like we've done many times before. We're then going to search for an append for the string. And we're going to go ahead and plug this into our return node. It'll give us a conversion. And then we're going to add a pin, and we'll plug our X into A, our Y into C, and we'll go ahead and put a lowercase x in the B. So we're going to go ahead and compile and save this. And I'm going to close this out. And we really don't need that current resolution text any longer. So I'm going to grab our get current resolution variable. I'm going to right click on it, and we're going to find references. And I'm going to double click on each one of these. So in our previous next resolution setting here, we are setting this text so we can delete everything that leads up to it. So the set, the get, and the break, and as well as the append. And the same thing for the next function down below it. And that'll make our graph significantly less size-wise. So I'm just going to go ahead and squeeze this over a little bit, and we still have the graphic settings applied. And just for redundancy's sake, I'm going to go ahead and duplicate it so each one has their own set graphic setting applied. So right now, when we're doing previous and next, all we're doing is setting the current resolution index. So we can go ahead and close out of this function. And then we can refresh our search by right-clicking on the current resolution, finding references. And that's going to leave this one reference. So when we set the settings values, we can go ahead and get rid of our current resolution and all the nodes that lead up to it. And plug everything back in. So now when we set our settings values, we're simply just going to set all of the values. And we will ignore our current resolution string. So I'm going to close out of that function. And I'm going to go ahead and we're going to find references again. And it's going to tell us that there's no results found. So I'm going to go ahead and delete this. And we should be able to compile and save with no issue. And if we hit play, we're going to go into our settings. And for our graphic settings here, the skipping of different resolutions will no longer be an issue. And it should apply the correct resolution setting at this time. So I'm going to go ahead and exit out. And we'll close out. Well, actually, we'll just set the settings menu widget aside for now. We don't need to close it. And we're going to go into our sounds folder. So for the purposes of today, I already went ahead and imported some music into our content browser. And I just made a folder inside of the sounds for music. Then I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to create a folder for SFX as well. And I'm going to put our weapon overheat sound into that SFX folder. And I'm going to go ahead and create a new folder. And we're going to call this our sound classes. And we're going to go into our sound classes folder. And we're going to go ahead and right click. And we're going to go to sounds. And we're going to go ahead and create a new sound class. And I'm going to call this the master underscore SC for sound class. And we're going to go ahead and double click on it to open it up. And it'll give us our master sound class here. And we want to go ahead and create some child sound classes as well. So this master sound class here is going to dictate the master volume for everything that is a child of it, but it's not going to affect the individual volumes of the children. So we'll get to that in a second. So from our master sound class here, I'm going to drag off from the children, and we're going to name this new sound class. I'm going to call this our music underscore SC. And of course I misspelled it, but that's okay. And then I'm going to drag off from here, and we're going to create a new sound class, and we're going to call this our SFX underscore SC. And then you may want to create subchildren of these. So for example, with this SFX sound class here, I can drag off and we'll call it the UI underscore SC for the user interface sounds. And then we can do things like dragging off here. We can add a new sound class. We'll call it gunfire underscore SC. Now, the way this is going to work is each one of these have their own properties to the left, and they're going to have a volume, a pitch, and these are going to be relative to the branch that they exist on. So, for example, let's say we have this master sound class here. We can set the volume for this, and we can set the volume for the children, the music, and the SFX. So, if we have our volume on our SFX and our music to 1, and we drop the volume on the master sound class down to half, these individual volumes will still be at 1, but they will be reduced by half because of the master sound class. And you can use this to balance different sounds within your game or different types of sounds. So say you have a sound class of footprints and all the footprints are a little bit loud. Instead of going through all of the footprint sounds, you can set up a sound class in here. So under SFX, we can give it a new sound class name. We'll call it footsteps underscore SC. And you can individually balance the footsteps against the gunfire and the UI sounds. So if the SFX volume comes down, it'll universally affect all three of these, but they'll remain relative to each other. So it won't override their volume levels. It will just react with it multiplicatively. So once we have our sound classes set up, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hit save. And we're going to close out of our sound class. And we're going to go into our main menu. So in our sound classes folder, we're going to go ahead and we're going to right click. And we're going to go to sounds again. And we're going to grab a sound mix. And I'm going to call this our master underscore sound mix. And if we go ahead and open up our sound mix, what this is going to do is we can add those sound classes to our sound mix and then mix the volumes of them. So under sound classes here, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to add 3 elements. So I'm going to go ahead and for our sound class, for the first one, I'm going to add our master sound class. For the second one, I'm going to add our SFX sound class. And for the last one, I'm going to add our music sound class. Because those are the 3 ones that we're going to want to go ahead and adjust. So I'm going to go ahead and hit save. And we can close out of our sound mix. And then we're just going to hit save all. And we're going to go back into our settings menu widget. And I'm going to go ahead and go over to our sound graph here. And right now we're setting the master volume after we rearrange it. And then the text is reading the value of the master volume. And the reason I was doing it this way was in preparation for the way that the plugin I was going to use was going to work. But since that's now outdated, I'm going to go ahead and we're going to get rid of this here. And from our on value changed for our master volume slider here, I'm going to drag out and I'm going to search for set sound mix class override. And what we can do here is we can readjust that sound mix that we just created. So we can plug our value into the volume and our value back into our master volume over here. And then in the sound mix modifier, we're only going to have our master sound mix to modify. So we're going to select that. And then we're going to select the sound class. And we're going to find our master sound class. And then I'm just going to go ahead and duplicate these for each one of our other sliders. And we'll plug everything into place. So we'll plug our value into the volume and our value into the music volume, as well as our value into the volume of the second one and our value into the SFX volume. And we can go ahead and drag these back over. And then for the second two, we're going to have to select the appropriate sound class. So for our SFX slider, we're going to want to select the SFX sound class. And then for our music slider, we're going to want to select our music sound class. And we can go ahead and compile and save that. All right, so now that we have this set up, we're going to have an issue with the way that it displays the numbers on our screen because we changed how we set the master volume. So we're going to have to make a couple of fixes. So if we go up to our functions, we're going to have to open up our set settings value here. And we went through this process where we mapped the range of our master volume to the set volume. And we're going to go ahead and we're going to get rid of those map ranges. And we're going to plug it directly into our sound volume. All right, so now we have that cleaned up. We're basically just plugging in our volumes into the set values, and we're going to take the raw value. And we're going to have to change up the way everything is displayed on our sound settings panel as well. So we're going to go back into our designer, and I'm going to go ahead and hide the graphics pane and show the sound pane. And then for each one of these volumes here, I'm going to grab the text and we're going to get the, we're going to search for the binding. And we're just going to have to change this up a little bit. So I'm going to get rid of this to the float to text. And we're going to take this, we're going to multiply it by 100. That's only 10. We're going to multiply it by 100. And then we're going to go ahead and floor it. So it'll round down, and we're going to plug the return into our return node. And then we're going to have to do the same for the other two volumes as well. So we'll go back to the designer, grab our text binding for our SFX volume, and I just copied it. So I'm going to grab it and I'm just going to paste into place, plug our SFX volume in, and plug the return volume in. And then finally, we'll do it for the music as well. All right, so let's go ahead and take it for a little bit of a whirl. I'm going to compile and save, and we want to check to make sure that everything in the menu is operating like it should. Now, if we have previously saved values, these values might show up as really not accurate. So I'm going to grab the slider. I'm going to set this to 75 for each of these volumes. And I'm going to go back, and we go back into the menu. It's saving the appropriate values. And we're going to go ahead and exit out and then relaunch it to make sure that it reloads the same values appropriately. So if we go into settings and our sound, it's still holding our 75 values. So we're going to go ahead and exit. And now we actually have to play some sound. So in our main menu here, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go to blueprints and I'm going to open the level blueprint. And at the very end of our begin play chain here, I'm going to head in. I'm going to go ahead and search for a spawn. And we want to spawn a sound. So I'm going to select spawn sound 2D. And I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to select one of those music assets. So we're going to play the sound cue. And then as well, I'm going to drag off so we can test our SFX volume as well. I am going to go ahead and search for a timer by event. And then I'm going to set this to loop every 1 second. We're going to set it to looping. And I'm going to drag off, and we're going to go ahead and spawn, or we're going to do a custom event. And we don't really need to name it because we're going to get rid of it after we finish testing. And we're going to go ahead and spawn a sound 2D. And I'm going to go ahead and search for overheat noise and select the sound cue. So this is going to play the sound cue over and over again at an interval of every 1 second. So that way we can test what's going on. Now there's one other thing what we're going to have to do, and if you've been paying attention, I haven't added very many sounds to our game as of yet, and this is the reason why. So I'm going to compile this, and I'm going to go back to our main menu, and we're going to have to grab those sounds. We're going to have to find the sound cues. So in the case of the weapon sound cue overheat, we're going to have to open it up, and under sound here, it's going to have a sound class associated with it. So this is going to be an SFX sound. So I'm going to set it to our SFX sound class. And we're going to save that. And then I'm going to find the music that I ended up playing. And we're going to find the sound cue. And I'm going to set the sound class for this one to be our music sound class. So we're going to go ahead and hit save. And then back out the main menu, I'm just going to hit save all. And keep in mind that anytime you have any sound cues, if you want them to react to the different sliders, either the SFX or the music independent of the master volume, you are going to have to set the sound class in the cue. So that's one of the reasons I haven't added a lot of sounds yet. So we are going to have to go to the point where we go through our weapons and we open up all the sounds, and we have to go through every single one of them, and we have to set the sound class to be the SFX sound class, or in the case that we made child classes, we have to set it to that child class. So one thing I forgot is we have to go ahead and we have to initiate that mix. So we're going to have to go ahead and drag off of our set current widget here before we spawn our sounds. And we're going to search for set sound, and we want to set base sound mix. And in here, we're going to go ahead and select our master sound mix. And we're going to go ahead and compile. And we'll go back to our main menu, and I'm going to save everything. And if we hit play, we're going to hear that we have the alarm sound playing repetitively every 1 second. And we have some music in the background as well. So we go to our settings and we go to our sound. I'm going to go ahead, and if we drag our master volume down, both of the sounds should go away, which they do. And if we drag it back up, both of the sounds should come back. Now if I drag the SFX volume down, the alarm noise is going to fade out. And if we drag it back up, it's going to start playing again. And finally, if we drag our music volume all the way down, we're just going to hear the alarm, we're not going to hear the music. So if we drag it back up, the music is going to come back. So I'm going to hit back and exit because this is working appropriately the way it should. And in our main menu level blueprint here, I'm going to get rid of our timer by event and spawning the sound 2D for the alarm, because we don't want that, but I do want the music to stay in place. So I'm going to go ahead and compile this, and we're going to hit save all. So one thing to keep in mind, from any point now on, you're going to want to use sound cues for any of the sounds that you use. And once you create a sound cue, you're going to want to go ahead and, for example, here in the rifle sounds, we have our rifle fire cue. And I'm going to explain this in just a second, but you're going to want to set the sound class in here to, in my case, I created a gunfire sound class in case I want to mix it based off of other SFX sounds. So I'll set it to the gunfire sound class. Now, the way the sounds that came with the game are set up is each sound cue will play two sounds. One of them is going to be a nearby sound, and one of them is going to be a long distance sound. So he sets it up so there's a close stereo shot and there's a mono distance. So what this does is it plays two sounds simultaneously. And depending on how far away from the sound you are, you'll be able to hear either one of the sounds. But the problem is it's playing both of those sounds regardless of whether you hear them, and it's going to go ahead and it's going to fill up all the audio channels that we can hear. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to get rid of all the mono sounds down here because these are the long distance sounds, and I'm going to get rid of the crossfade by distance. So that's just going to leave the stereo shot, and we're going to go ahead and plug this into the modulator in place, and we're going to go ahead and hit save. And you may have noticed when testing the game while running around, you're hearing weird echoing noises or very delayed sounds. And one of the reasons is going to be you're hearing a combination of the long-range shot and the short-range shot because of you moving around, but also because there's a limited number of sounds that can play at any given time within Unreal Engine. That number is 32. So if more than 32 sounds play concurrently, it's then going to try and get rid of sounds, and that's going to obviously affect the audio quality of the game. So all of the rifle firing sounds, or all of the firing sounds in general, are going to need to be modified. So we have like the rifle fire end cue here. I'm just going to do the same thing with all of these sounds. I'm going to go through all the sound cues, get rid of the crossfade, and plug our stereo shot into the modulator. So I'm not going to do all of that while recording, but that is something I'm going to do for every one of the sounds that came with our sci-fi weapons package. Now, the one other thing that came in the sound package with our weapons is attenuation settings. And what these attenuation settings do, let's go ahead and open it up. We have the weapon shot. And if we click the little down arrow next to attenuation, what these are going to do is they're going to determine fading of the volume based on distance. In this case, it has a radius of 800, so 800 centimeters away from the center. And then there's a fall-off distance, and the sound of the shot will fall off when you get to 40 meters. And these are going to really be the important ones for us to pay attention to, because it's really going to dictate how far away we can hear things. So I'm going to go ahead and close out of this attenuation here, and I'm going to pretty much leave the attenuation settings as is. There's no real need to change any of them. Now, one other thing we're going to have to end up doing is we're going to have to apply our sound settings when the game initially launches. So I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to open up our 3P game instance, and we're going to have to create a new function, and we're going to go ahead and we're going to apply sound settings. Now, when we apply our sound settings, when we make the sliders in the menu move, we're applying the sound in real time. So this is going to only set the initial sound settings when we first launch the game. So we're not going to really need to pull any input data. So I'm just going to grab our settings save game. We're going to go ahead and get our sound settings. Then we're going to go ahead and break this. And then we want to go ahead and push these. So from our apply sound settings here, I'm going to drag off, and we're going to set our sound mix class override. And we're going to have to go ahead and duplicate this for each one of our sound settings. So I'll plug our master volume into the first one, our SFX volume into the second, and our music volume into the third. And we'll connect up all the execution pins. So we want to set the mix modifier on all three to be our master sound mix. Then for our master volume, we want to set it to our master sound class. For our SFX, we'll set it to our SFX sound class. And finally, for our music, we'll set it to our music sound class. And I'm just going to throw in some reroute nodes to make it a little neater. And that is going to be it. We're just going to compile and save. And then we want to actually employ this. So we'll go ahead and open up the blueprints for our level. And after we set our base mix is when we want to go ahead and apply the sound settings. And we might actually want to put this before we set our widget. I'm not sure if it'll actually matter. But we definitely have to apply our settings after we set our bass sound mix. So I'm going to go ahead and, you know what, just for convenience sake, because we're applying the graphic settings here, I'm going to go ahead and drag this off to the side. I'm going to disconnect the pins for this, and I'm going to go ahead and move this over here. So right after we apply our graphics settings, we're going to set our bass sound mix. And then we want to go ahead and drag off of our game instance cast. And we're going to go ahead and apply our sound settings. If you put this apply sound settings before you set the bass sound mix, it will not affect it in any way, because the sound mix has to be set before you can modify it. So then we'll go ahead and plug in our music sound, and then we'll plug in the cast for our player HUD. And I'm just going to go ahead and separate these out so there's some differentiation between each one. So the first one deals with our game instance, and the second portion over here deals with our player HUD. So we should be able to compile and save all. And if we hit play, it should automatically apply our sound in the background. And if we go to our settings and move our sound, we shouldn't have any ridiculous jumps in the sound mix. So if, for example, I drag this all the way down to 0, and we go ahead and exit out, and we relaunch, we shouldn't be able to hear the background music. So it stops the background music from playing, and we aren't able to hear it anymore. So we can go ahead and I'm going to set this back up, and we're going to exit out. So a few things to keep in mind is with our sound classes here, anytime you end up adding new sounds, you are going to have to go ahead and assign the sound cues a sound class in order for the volume sliders to work on them. So it is a bit tedious when you already have a ton of sounds in place, because you have to make sure to get all of those sounds. So that's going to complete today's video. If you have any questions or comments, go ahead and place them down below, or hit me up at my Facebook page. And thanks for watching.